This video is over the basic introduction to the TI-83 or TI-84 graphing calculator. All versions of the 83 or 84, the key sequence, will look exactly the same. So it doesn't matter whether you have the plus edition, silver edition, plus silver edition, or any other edition that you may have. Everything from this video is going to look exactly the same to you. So let's first start with just an image of the graphing calculator. And you can see up here up top that this one is a TI-84 plus silver edition, but again, all editions of this calculator will look exactly the same. So we see the image of the graphing calculator here. What we're going to start with is just the keys. So we're going to not focus on the screen up top here. We're going to focus on the keys down here at the bottom. Now, we can see that the keys are somewhat color-coded. So we have the numerical keys in the white. We have the operational keys are over here in gray. We have the other keys in maybe dark gray. We see this blue one, see this green one, see these gray keys up here. So the keys are somewhat color-coded, but the keys are also divided into sections. The first section is pretty obvious. We see that these top 5 keys here are separate than the rest of all of the other keys. So that is kind of one section of the calculator. The other sections are not as obvious. So here I have separated them into sections for you. So we see the top 5 keys are in yellow. Those keys actually represent the graphing keys. So when we get to the graphing tutorials, those are the keys that we're going to be using the most. The pink keys, so the next 2 rows, including the cursor keys with the arrow keys, those represent another section. The next row in orange represents another section. And then the last big purple box, that represents the last section. Each of these sections has a name. So the yellow section is the graphing keys. The pink section is the edit keys. The orange section is the advanced function keys. And then the purple section is the scientific keys. So the purple section is called the scientific keys because if you had a scientific calculator, you would have all of the keys in this box here. But the graphing calculator adds much more keys than what just a scientific calculator has. Now, all of the keys are basically in the same kind of tone, except for the blue and the green key. So even though this graphing calculator has more keys than just a regular scientific calculator, it actually doesn't have enough keys. So we can see that each key actually has 3 different purposes to it. So if I pick this LN key here, we can see that this LN key actually has 3 different purposes. The first purpose is if I just push the key as is, that would pull up LN for natural log. But we see there's actually 2 things above it. So if I wanted to push the blue thing, which is e to the x button, then I would need to push the blue second key and then the ln button, and that would actually retrieve the feature of e to the x. Alpha is to see all of the alphabetical letters, and we can see that all of those are in the green. So if I wanted to pick the S, then I would push the alpha button and then the ln button, and that would tell the calculator to select the alphabetical letter S. So each key has basically 3 different purposes. Now that we've seen how the calculator is set up, let us actually start to use the calculator. So I have a calculator over here on the left, and we're actually going to be using this calculator to do all 6 of these examples on the right. So the first thing that we need to know how to do with the calculator is how to turn the calculator on and how to turn the calculator off. So to turn your calculator on, you're just going to push the on button, which is on the very bottom left of the calculator. If you want to turn the calculator off, notice the off is written above the on in the blue. So to turn your calculator off, you push the second and then the on button, and that tells your calculator to turn off. Now, since mine is an electronic version of the calculator, it doesn't know how to turn off, okay? But hopefully if you were doing this at home, you would figure out how to turn this calculator off. All right, now we're going to do some of these examples that we see over here on the right. So my first example is 18,944 divided by 256. So the nice thing about the graphing calculator is you can just type it in exactly like you see it. So 18,944. The operational buttons are over here on the right, so divided by. Now notice division is written as a fraction rather than the division symbol, but it means the exact same thing. And then the number 256. Notice there is no equal sign on the calculator. What we will use instead is this enter button on the bottom right, and it is the exact same thing as the equal sign. So notice it will input the problem here on the left, it will output the answer here on the right. So the answer to our first example is 74. Example 2 is negative 8 minus 2. Now something that I need to point out here is that there's different keys between the negative and the minus. The minus button is over here on the right with the rest of the operations buttons. The negative button is actually over here down below the 3 or to the right of the decimal point. The negative button is in parentheses. So the calculator needs to know the difference between those two buttons. If you get them mixed up, it will give you a syntax error and it will tell you that you have used them incorrectly. So for this problem, we need to push the negative button, the one in parentheses, 8, and then the subtraction button, so negative 8 minus 2. Notice on your screen there's a difference between them. Minus is a longer dash and it's in the middle of the screen. Negative is a shorter dash and it's up just a little bit. To figure out what the answer to this problem is, we just hit enter, and we figure out the answer to example 2 is negative 10. Example 3 is 3 squared. So we push the 3 button, and then to push the squared button, that is actually over here on the left, and it looks like x squared, and what that x squared button does is it squares whatever number you have inputted in the first place. This is a newer edition of the calculator, so it is actually written it as 3 squared. So to figure out what this is, we hit the enter button, and it tells us that 3 squared is equivalent to 9. Example 4 is the square root of 9. If we look at all of the keys on the calculator, we do not see a square root button written on any key. But we do see it over here written above the x squared button, above the button that we just used to square 3 in the last example. So it's written as blue, so to retrieve it, we push the second button, and then we push the x squared button, and notice that retrieves the square root button. To type in our number, we just push 9. Now, to get out of the square root, it tells you how to do that. It tells you to push the arrow over. Since this example is a simple example, we don't really have anything else to do in this example, we could have skipped that step and it would have not made any difference. However, if you have a square root plus something else per se, then you need to tell your calculator to get out of the square root. If you had an older edition of the calculator, when you push the square root button, it will open the parentheses. So you would push 9, and then you would push the closed parentheses to tell your calculator that you are done with the square root. To figure out what the answer is, we hit enter, and it gives us our answer of 3. Example 5, 2 to the 5th power. So we push in the base of 2. Now if we look, we see that we do not have an x to the 5th power like we had an x to the squared power somewhere. So to pick any power other than squared, the easiest way to do it is to push the caret button, and that's spelled C-A-R-A-T. Notice that it told my calculator that I'm picking a power. I just need to put in the 5th power. Same way to get out of the 5th power that we got out of the square root is to push the over button. Again, since this is a simple operation, if you would have skipped that in this problem, it wouldn't have affected you. But if you had to do something else at the same time, you need to make sure to get out of that power there. If you did this on the older edition of the calculator, it would look like 2 and then the caret button and then 5 on your main screen, but it means the same thing. So to figure out what this is, we push enter and we get our final answer of 32. Example 6 has multiple operations. It's asking us to do a multiplication and an addition problem in the same problem. The nice thing about the graphing calculator is it understands rules of operation, so you can do all of those at once. You can type in that whole expression at one time. So 3 times, notice that's written as a star, but it means times, 5 plus 7. So you can type that in all at one time. If you push your enter button, your calculator knows what operations to do first, and so it gives you the final answer of 22. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about here is notice that we did lots of things on our screen, and so if it ever gets too busy for you, if you ever want to clear your screen, all you have to do is push the clear button. But notice I did all of these examples without ever having to clear the screen, so if you keep things up on your screen, it will not affect anything throughout the way. But if you don't like it being messy like that, you are always more than welcome to push clear, and it will clear the whole screen. So this video just overcaps the keys of the calculator as well as some basic operations.